In my previous life, I had a friend, Lala, an absolutely remarkable woman who lived in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. Lala and I met on the Black Sea coast where we were vacationing in little cottages that were normally reserved for the workers of a certain southern factory. We had both managed to rent our cottages through quote-unquote influence. We were both taking vacations from our husbands who, having reached us by telephone at the resort office, encouraged us to get a good rest, thereby guaranteeing good rests for themselves. Lala was accompanied by her charming teenage daughter, a slender, dark, and, as is usual for that age, pimply girl. Lala was chubby, her daughter tall and thin. People immediately began to call them Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. I was with my 7-year-old daughter. I was somewhat of a show-off. I had a stylish handmade knitted poncho, and I'd put together a cloth one for my daughter. The vacationing Leningraders nicknamed us Mama Poncho and Little Poncho. We had very primitive accommodations, lots of sun and sea, and we were in a good mood. In the evenings, there were dances in the dark with amusing attempts by our teenage girls to break into the grown-up world of the dance floor, with Lala hovering all the while over her fledgling, protecting her from those sexy dark-eyed eagles from the Caucasus. After Lala and I completed our vacation together, we took leave of each other, but our friendship flourished, growing from a little stalk into a tall, graceful tree, and we began to confide in each other and then to travel back and forth between Leningrad and Moscow to see each other. True, the nicknames conferred on us at the resort changed into a single new name that we both shared. A meaningless, unaesthetic name. Hen. A name that seemed, to us, express only our eating preferences. This name is still with us, even though several decades have galloped past and our daughter's sons have thought up new names, and keeping up with the times, cruel ones. Now, Lala's grandson summons her with, "Roly-poly, come here!" Lala had opportunities to buy prestigious imported clothing for her friends at a normal price without going to profiteers. Clothing that was very valuable in those far-off and beautiful times. Beautiful times because if we wanted to buy something, or more exactly to get something, we had a goal. We had ways to do it, and it was an attainable dream. In addition, it was important to us. We were young, and when you're young, looking pretty is very important to you. Once, Lala bought me a marvelous outfit right out of Hollywood, a flimsy peignoir and a nightgown that was almost an evening gown. But nightgown doesn't even roughly reflect its beauty and the elegance of its tailoring, the features which in those utilitarian times could not be justified by the nightgown's designated function. This enchanting, skin-tight garment made of blue, sparkling, silvery nylon reached down to the floor and was trimmed with feathers in the most delicate taste. I was so delighted by the outfit that I couldn't think of wearing it. I often tried it on. It fit just right. I modeled it for my friends, eliciting the utmost envy. I put it on only in the most meaningful moments to imprint the moment's magnificence forever in the heart of my man. I need to say that there were more than just a few such happy moments in my life. The peignoir stayed with me through several husbands, and not only husbands. And how strange it was that the reaction of men to this unearthly beauty was not always the same. My first husband died very early in life in an automobile accident. After the shock of being widowed at the age of 35, I no longer remember how he reacted to my lingerie. Although certainly our 17-year marriage, we'd married when we were students, didn't undergo any changes with the appearance of this new super sexy outfit. It didn't cause any alteration in our usual busy lives. I should tell you that I used to take my blue treasure out of its original cherished cellophane package very rarely, only when my spirits were up. My husband had been very busy with his work and had had many concerns about our home and our child. In addition, he was a very jealous person. I remember that one of his birthdays, I gave him an electric razor, after which for a whole month he tormented me with suspicions and questions about where I'd gotten the money. After that, for the rest of our lives together, I gave him combs and similar gifts. Romance in Blue could end in a scene. When I went to sleep, I discovered I could stretch out my tired body without waking up my husband so that he wouldn't assert his conjugal rights every night. The Blue Peignoir might provoke unwanted activity. Decades later, I regretted this. Afterwards, when I became a widow, periodically my spirits rose, but this didn't happen very often. The rhythm of new splashes of serious relationships in my life stipulated that there would be interludes of 3 years. The Peignoir participated directly in all these fateful changes. The next man in my life after the death of my first husband, a man a good deal younger than I was, paid not the slightest attention when I modeled the peignoir. His emotions were strong without the peignoir. It seemed that he loved me. So his values were different. I would like to hope that he has preserved the image of the red-haired widow in blue in his memory. My 3 years with this man, my second husband, flew by like 3 days. My second husband had been born into a modest family in a small town in the Urals. He was a very good-looking fellow, a prominent female TV personality who happened to be passing through, saw him and carried him off to the central television in Moscow. My husband was smart. His face was well known, but inwardly, he was a very modest person. From the outside looking in, you could only see this with a magnifying glass. His lifestyle was absolutely austere. His motto regarding all the attributes of a good life, regarding all earthly goods, was, "We don't need anything. We have everything we want." I recall this with some condescension, but also with a great deal of respect. Once, near the beginning of our marriage, during the period when we were still getting to know each other, my husband left for his hometown to visit his mother, a tiny, dried-up old woman without any education, but a convinced supporter of the Soviet government's military campaign in Afghanistan. His mother used to insist that a Soviet presence in Afghanistan was necessary. Otherwise, she would proclaim, American President Reagan would, quote-unquote, climb up on the mountains and spy on our country from there. Then she'd place her hand on her forehead just above her eyes like a border guard looking to the countryside over. It would almost drive people to distraction. So, awaiting my husband's arrival on the day of his return from his trip to his mother's on a train due in at 5 a.m., I had by 6 a.m. already put on perfume, applied all the cosmetics available in the apartment, gotten the cherished peignoir out of the innermost compartment of the chest, put hairpins in my hair, and assumed an appropriate pose. When the bell rang, I opened the door. We hugged each other, and I, having suggested a cup of coffee, proudly clicked off into the kitchen, pulling up my back, pulling in my stomach, and everything else that could be pulled in. I was proud to be mature, to be enveloped in this filmy beauty of this blue triumph of the Western way of life. Here, my husband, appreciating aesthetics, said with feeling, "Tisha, take that off right away before you get it dirty. Put on your old nightie." The celebration of the soul was over, and the blue magnificence was put back into its packaging and returned to the deepest compartment of the chest. The next stage came out of turn. When I was young at the beginning of my career as a public health director, I had participated in some sort of conference called to consider a complaint brought by a working man to the district party committee. There, I met the district party committee's technical advisor who had been assigned to investigate the problem. He was a tall fellow from one of the Baltic republics, young and blondish, whose cheeks turned bright red in emotional situations. He noticeably reddened at the hostility displayed by an official of the district committee toward the complaint. The color of his cheeks indicated either embarrassment or a manly reaction. We had some innocent meetings in the district committee's garden where we discussed things impersonally, guarding against the appearance of any sort of familiarity, as if we were having a business discussion at a chance meeting. Keep in mind that a Soviet man's public behavior had to be beyond reproach. The behavior of a district committee members even more so. Our shared feelings showed themselves only in our somewhat purplish complexions and in our warm feelings which were unpleasantly disturbing. We didn't get any closer than that. When I told him during a telephone conversation that our family circumstances stood in the way of our getting closer and that the situation was so upsetting to me that I was losing weight, indeed, that I had gotten so thin that my skirt kept slipping down, he remarked, "It's slipping down under the wrong circumstances." We parted on this note on good terms, losing track of each other for about 13 years. Later, I was making preparations for a trip abroad as a tourist, at a time when such a trip required the approval of one's district committee, even if one wasn't a party member, as I was not. They had to decide after an interview whether you were worthy of representing Soviet society abroad. Were you politically correct? Were your morals in good shape, etc.? The interview took place after I had spent a sleepless, nervous night anxiously asking myself, would they let me go? Would they not let me go on a trip that would be made at my expense? The interviewers were old Bolsheviks, indeed very old Bolsheviks. One of them, as I recall, had a running nose, which so distracted me that I forgot the purpose of the interview. They didn't let me go. I didn't measure up. Naturally, I did what any experienced Soviet person would do. I began a campaign to find another way around the mountain. During my campaign, I met a resolute member of Soviet society, a man completely dedicated to its goals, the second secretary of the same district committee, a very high position, who turned out to be that same blonde fellow. I call him up. I realize that he knows about my interview, but he says it wouldn't be proper for a person in his position to publicly involve himself in such a minor matter. We chat over the telephone. As I recall, he called from a public telephone, not from his office. He was a man of rare honesty and of the highest moral character. He is devoting all his efforts to this job, to his work for the party. He's still married to the same woman. Sometimes, when he sees a redhead, he thinks of me. It's amusing that his wife is, of course, since he's a blonde, a brunette who hates redheads, probably instinctively. At that time, I was in a short gap in my 3-year cycles. Therefore, without a thought about appearances and with no plans for anything serious or sinful, I invited him to my apartment. He was to come to my apartment immediately after work, after telling his wife that he had been delayed by a meeting at the office. I was very anxious. I hadn't seen him for years. I was also somewhat aroused, and at the same time, I was in a playful mood. I wanted to startle this party official with a frivolous, enchanting scene. My blue wonder was pulled out of the crumpled depths, scrutinized and aired out. Regrettably, some of its feathers had gotten frayed during my occasional flashes of desire to imitate life as it's shown on the screen. But overall, the garment still shimmered. The hour approached. Full of desire to daze my guest, who had probably even forgotten my face, I'd carefully worked out a pose in front of my mirror. Now, I waited for him by the door, smoothing down feathers that were standing on end. The bell rings. I open the door. A very interesting fellow is standing there, a little taller than I, although on the occasion of donning the peignoir, I had also put on translucent platform sandals. I smile. I see his face is turning crimson. He's apparently not learned to control his complexion when it's most needed, and he looks confused. Perhaps ecstasy is confusing him. That's what I'm hoping. He takes off his raincoat. We embrace. His hands are trembling. We are both erotically aroused. We go into the living room, not the bedroom. He sits down on the couch, I on his lap. Awkward embraces, passionless kisses. A million needless thoughts run through my head and maybe also through his head. Timid attempts to uncover my breast, unnatural movements. And I realize that for him, poor devil, it's all over. The opportune moment, the moment he had waited for, has already passed. He's terribly embarrassed. I'm on fire, but I'm disenchanted. The fire in me dies down and goes out. We move ahead. I caress his head. Without speaking, I console him. He's red, very upset. I forgive him. We drink tea, and I, already having cooled down and having reacquired my former ironic tone, ask him how he likes my outfit. He is very frank. He admires it and pays me a lot of compliments, saying that time has made me prettier. It's always pleasant to hear this, even when it isn't true. Then I ask him a malicious, improper question. Has he met any woman in such a stylish outfit intended only for him? He answers honestly, never. I have never at any time in my life been able to see or get to know women. I work very hard. After work, I'm tired. Family matters, problems with my daughter, and so on swallow me up. I've never had any secret personal life, and you see the result. I felt sorry for this very honest man, inexperienced with women, with lingerie, and with men's leisure pursuits. Nothing but dedication to the party. So once more, my blue outfit lay at the bottom of the chest. After the usual 3-year interlude, I married again, enduring almost 12 years of marriage with this husband. My station in life had become very comfortable. Our surroundings, our clothing, our trips abroad became more and more expensive and prestigious. The Blue Peignoir was put to use during short trips, cautiously as before. My new husband, who was very sophisticated in spite of his humble origins, very much appreciated it. He had had a lot of experience with stylish clothing from other countries, as well as with games of love and affairs of the heart, which he had had the chance to practice with 5 wives and countless lovers. For some reason in this period, during which I was able to put my beloved blue-feathered sensation to use, I felt completely at ease. Either this was a normal manifestation of my new higher station in life, or my current man had eased my psychoerotic tensions. He was indeed very experienced in erotic games, both with and without peignoirs. Maybe his long stay in America during his younger years had satisfied his need to look at sex both dressed and undressed as Hollywood shows it. But he had brought me to America, and I had brought my shabby but valued as ever peignoir with me, a peignoir given to me by Lala from Leningrad. In America, I found an abundance of lingerie with feathers and lace, some expensive, some very expensive, and some very cheap. The brilliance of my treasure dimmed in my heart, but something always prevented me from buying a new chic outfit. Sometimes the price or the lack of money, sometimes simply because it seemed pointless, and perhaps nostalgia for my youth and my former life just didn't want the Blue Peignoir to have a rival. Having reached the end of his career, my husband retired, and my keepsake, as it had before, went back into the wardrobe where it lay crumpled. This is the appropriate place in the adventures of the Blue Peignoir to note that the number of wardrobes in which the peignoir has had occasion to take shelter has increased over time in a geometric progression. In Russia, there were many wardrobes, but in America, over 10 years, the number amounts to a dozen. This is the life of a piece of lingerie purchased about 25 years ago. The peignoir did have occasion to come out into the light and the fresh air, but more often, it stayed in the wardrobe in the belly of a suitcase. Twice the suitcase went on a trip to Europe, twice to the shore of the ocean. Perhaps its most successful excursion was to the ocean shore in southern New Jersey. This was a 2-day trip with a girlfriend, an elegant woman with expensive outfits and with a very refined and demanding taste. At that time, I didn't have the money to buy new outfits, so with some doubts, I took my blue set. To tell you the truth, I had nothing to replace it with. But as it turned out, it was really right for me. I felt proud of myself. On the 2-room veranda of our flat, we drank coffee and chatted while the ocean wind fluttered the remaining blue feathers. I, it seems, didn't look bad. I looked just right. A new husband came into my life, an American, a wonderful man, good, intelligent. But he came to me too late. The train had already left the station. He bought me a lot of lingerie and even black stockings. It's all in the wardrobe. I prefer to wear comfortable cotton things. I buy a lot of clothing, I hang it in the closet, and forget it. But the Blue Peignoir is resting in its usual wardrobe. By the way, with a marvelous view of the Hudson and Manhattan. It's gotten somewhat faded and stale. Its former smoothness and the fresh smell of its youth are already gone. But it's still beautiful. I wonder, though, will it have a second life?